So our goal is to keep the water on our land as long as we possibly can. Our water is our number one resource, besides our time, and the sunlight, and our soil, and our energy, and all that. No, but the goal is to keep the water on the land as long as possible. You know, it's kind of like a game you start to play in your head. Instead of letting the water just rush down the hills and start to create erosion patterns, you know, we want to kind of capture that and start spreading that out. The ideal would be to have a spring above our house, like 30-foot higher. I mean, that would be ideal. And then we could gravity feed, if it's a clean spring, down to our house.
What type of materials would you use for that? Like,
to collect the spring?
PVC pipes probably aren't very good because all the chlorinated, right? What would you use for piping?
Well, it's always going to be a balance of like what you can find and afford and conveniently put your hands on, as opposed to like the supernatural part that may not last as long. I mean, if we don't use PVC or piping, you know, it's hard, it's difficult. It's not like we're going to use bamboo and we're going to replace it every year. You know? Okay, well, I mean, we could, you know, but we do want things that last a long time and we don't have to put a lot of maintenance in it, you know. Yeah, that's a tough one.
They have black poly pipe at Home Depot. That's what you use.
Yeah.
Black poly pipe you would use? What if it's 30 years old? Is that safe to use after it's been, because there is black poly pipe and it's, yeah, 30, 40, 50 years old?
We have one that's like 45, 50 years old and it's fine.
It's probably, in some ways, it could be safer. Well, it's continuously like flushing, you know. But yeah, the standards 30, 40, 50 years ago, yeah, there may have been more lead and different things in the, you know, the plastic, and so yeah, I don't know. Yeah. And then so we're looking at, if we do come on a piece of land, if we do have a spring, you know, we may want to position our house a little lower. So it's just like spring is best. Well water is second. Well, we can basically, I mean, not really, but basically we can put a well most anywhere we want on our property. You've got to have access. The well rig is super big, has to get to the spot. There's some spots that are not as good as others, but basically, you know, scale of permanence, if we didn't have the spring, you know, we could say, oh, this is a beautiful piece of land. I'd love to put my house, nestle it in here, and I'll get my well close to that. So the well's not driving where you're putting the house at that point. But if you have a spring, that may drive the decision where you put your house. Does that make sense? It's because that's like really sweet to have a spring. And then, you know, roof catchment, I already talked about that a little bit, but from the roof to cisterns, you can put a first flush. First flush is this cool little system that for like the first 5 minutes, when you're collecting water off the roof, it's just turning the water and letting it flush out. So it flushes all the impurities. That first flush is where we get like 95% of the impurities that come in our water, either in the landscape or on a roof. So if we could flush that a little bit and then collect water, and they make devices for that you just put on your gutter. It's the first flush, and then it hits the cistern. So cisterns are, you know, around the house, and cisterns are really cool. The problem with cisterns, though, is that they're limited in size. So, you're usually going to need, in your landscape, if you're doing any kind of production, more water than what most cisterns can hold. And B, what's going to happen is you get a big rain, even if you have 1,000, 2,000 gallon cistern, that's going to overflow pretty quickly. So then we start thinking about, keeping the water on our land. It's like this little game. So it goes from our roof, then it's hitting our cistern, and we got the water in there, then it's overflowing, and then we can start putting it in the landscape. And that's when we can direct it into the landscape. We can build basins in the landscape. It's really cool. These it's just like basically a pool or a little pond. But it's not necessarily, you're not trying to keep the water in there continuously. You're planting along the edge. So maybe we have our house, right? And then we have our gutter, and then we have our cistern, and maybe our first flush system is right here. And our water is coming down, it's hitting this, filling this up. Eventually, this overflows, and then we can start directing it along the landscape. And a basin is basically just like a little pool out here that we can direct the water into. We're not trying to make this watertight. We kind of want the water to infiltrate over time. We could, and that would be a pond, which is a little bit different than a basin. But around that, we can kind of have like an earthen mound or something, and then we could plant on this.
Elderberry.
Elderberry, yeah. Yeah, elderberry. Elderberry loves that edge. It will just keep growing. And it's a medicinal. And there's a real need for elderberry. Super easy to grow. You can live stake it. You basically just take a cutting of it, put it in the ground, and it roots. This time of year, up till, late spring. And then you can make medicine, syrup out of it, and different things. So, go ahead.
By live staking, just to clarify, I mean, like if I had a stream bank, maybe that was like possibly eroding because I cut out the weeds, and I could put elderberries in a row.
You really could. You could. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. You do a lot of things like that. Willow. Yep. Yep. A lot of things will live stake. And we could just keep playing this game. Eventually this overflows. And what I was saying about the basin is over a couple days, about 2 days, the water just infiltrates in the ground here. So it ends up, it's called a bloom, but it basically soaks in, and then this mound can take advantage of that. And basins are really, really kind of neat. You can put it in a swale around your house. So from here, it can overflow. And I'm just, it's a game. It's a way of just priming your thinking as a designer. There's no options that are off the table when you're doing design because it's just a thought process. Eventually, you're going to work through the thought process, and it's got to meet all these lists of needs, or it's for a client, it's got to meet their needs. Financially, it's got to make sense, this, that, and the other. There's like all these different ways of narrowing down those decisions, but like when you're just planning your homestead, you can be like really just like let your mind be free and open up to possibilities. It's not like a 1D, 2D dimensional kind of thing. This is like 3D. No, this is 5D. I mean, you're just going to keep thinking about ways you can use your water. This can overflow, and maybe we have a long swale here that's on contour. And then maybe eventually that overflows into a bigger pond, So, and then these could all be rearranged differently too. Most of them. I mean, you could have a bigger pond by the house. You could eliminate this. You could eliminate the basin. You could just catch water off the landscape instead of the house. So just a few examples of how we could, strategies with water. Get really creative with it.
Question about ponds.
Yes.
My collection system overflows to a pond that I created.
From your house roof? Yeah.
So are there certain plants that would do a better job of taking care of toxins and chemicals? I'm currently growing lotus and some other water plants, and they're doing really well, but are there other plants that would help with that? Because it's a 1,500 square foot roof, so everything comes into barrels and then it overflows.
Awesome. You shouldn't even be here, or you should be up here teaching. Come on. Get up here. No, just kidding. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you could do with that. What makes sense for ponds a lot of the times is to have a small wetland.
That's below the garden.
Yeah, but before it enters the pond, possibly. And with a little meander. This is the plan view, like we're looking down on it. But if your water is coming in, we could just like a creek, you could and this could be a pocket wetland. This could be really small. It doesn't have to be very big, but it'll basically look something like this. And it could be the size of this table or bigger. It has a path that makes the water go farther. So the water is going to come in the system, and it has to work its way. If this was drawn correctly, it would have to work its way. That's called short circuiting. And that happens a lot. Like water wants to find the shortest, lowest path to anything. So you constantly have to keep an eye on that because it will short circuit. It'll bypass all your wise designs, and then it's just like shooting straight through.
That's why you go walk out in your yard when it's pouring down rain, right?
That's the best time, yeah. But here, then you could plant, in here, there's all different plants that love to be in this bottom wet zone and that have filtration roots. A lot of the grasses, a lot of the wetland grasses have really strong filtration roots on them.
How far from the house would this idea need to be? 'Cause it's pretty close. There's not a lot of space.
Well, it could be wherever is convenient for your plan. I mean, this is just one way of doing it, What your concern is, pollutants off your roof?
Well, the roof is... Oh, let's see. The roof is probably 20 years old at this point. And I've thought about putting in the first flush system, but...
Yeah, they're not expensive. It's not a bad way to go. This whole pocket wetland could be right in front of your pond, where the water enters, the pond, and it could just be like almost like a little bay, and the water, basically, you're looking down at this, and there's an embankment, basically like a dam around this, and this is a depression. This whole center part is a depression. So it's going to go through this meander, but then the water has got to rise up to get to the overflow, and then it's going to overflow and hit your pond, potentially. And that just slows the water down. You're going to run it through filter plants. Yeah, it's just like a filter. This is a great strategy for extra light, extra warmth in your house, is having a basin or a pond to the south side of your home, even if it's super shallow, and it could have a liner even. But if you can position that in the right spot, here we have our house, and we have a small pond here, say, winter sun, low sun angle can come down here. I should draw this in yellow, sorry. But it's going to bounce off and it's going to hit your house. This makes a huge difference with warmth and just the general feel in your home. Or this could be a greenhouse and you could do that. If you position this too close, then you're going to get this summer sun that's higher is going to bounce in there. The higher sun angle here, if you position this correctly, is going to go like that. It's going to miss your house in the summer. And if you keep this away enough, but design it close enough, and then you can still have those deciduous plants in front that I was telling you about. So you could get constant shading in the summer. You know, maybe that's a little close to your house, but something like that, where you're getting summer shade, free winter sun. And know where your sewer lines are. It's a good, yeah.
I was going to have a long, thin, shallow pond to do exactly what you described. And we started digging on the wettest day of the year in 2014. And I suddenly realized we're going to hit the sewer line. And it was a lack of communication that I participated in. So this long, thin finger of a pond suddenly became 8 by 16, 3.5 feet deep, with a heck of a dam on the backside of it.
Yeah. Then you have another design opportunity, huh? You did what?
I built the greenhouse out to the pond.
That's cool. How'd that work?
It's awesome.
Yeah? You get a lot of light in the winter?
Yeah, I built a kerosene tank like 6 years ago.
Wow.
And I finally ran out of fuel.
Wow. That is amazing. That is huge. If we design everything like that, we would basically have no problems. We'd use less fuel, less money. You know, we'd have more money for other things. It's just, and that's just good design. I mean, you're applying good design. And yeah, when something comes up, then you really have to get creative. And you're always trying to keep it positive. You know, you could be like, oh my God, I can't believe they're hitting the sewer line and they didn't think of this and this and that. And then you start getting negative with it, but it's like, no, this is a design opportunity. I can make this better. You guys understand this concept though? It's huge. Especially if you could do this to your greenhouse. I mean, you really don't have to heat it. Or you can also, I mean, you can just keep going with this. You can put a basin in here that you store heat in. Sun hits it, even if it's just a narrow strip of water. And you can store heat, you know, on most cold days, because we still get sun, you know, usually a couple days a week, and most days have some sun that we can collect. So, any other questions? So ponds, also positioning them high in the landscape, it's like our energy potential. If our water is super low, there's not a lot of energy potential in it. We have to get it high to have that potential energy. And if we could store the water high in the landscape, and then we could gravity feed down from there. So that's a huge one. Trying to get our ponds high in the landscape. So we're taking advantage of slope. And this is a huge one also. Protect and enhance wetlands. Over the past, 100 years, we've lost significant portions of our wetlands. There is so much biodiversity in wetlands, and it's not an easy place to farm, and logical thinking we don't know how to make money on this, so let's drain it and fill it in and try to farm it. But then you're going against nature. Anytime you go against nature, you've always got more energy inputs that have to go into it. So it's going to be a really crappy place to farm because it's going to get flooded. You're going to have more energy into it. It's not a good location, but protecting and enhancing them, like never fill a wetland in. Like, I want you guys to be water protectors. They're so important. And so once we start getting our mainframe, we figure out where our water is, then we can start branching off with that. If we get our spring or our well or our pond in the landscape, then we could start running pipes off of that to distribute the water. And we just kind of like we're working with the main parts where we want it to go. And then we could keep refining those and zeroing in on it over time. Does that make sense? Yes?
Get 100 inches of rain a year.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I haven't been there a full year yet, but my problem seems to be so much moisture. I'm just surprised. Do you feel that most of your plantings require additional supplemental water?
Well, I mean, you sound like you're are you in Brevard or where are you?
No, I'm up in Haywood. I'm up between Maggie and Fines Creek in the mountains, 3,000 feet.
Yeah, so you're blessed with water. Yeah, but you're still, it's even more important for you. Maybe you don't need to store it, but you're going to have more erosion and runoff that you're going to have to manage.
But I don't intend my plantings to require a lot of additional supplemental water. Sure.
Well, that's the one side of it is your need, which your need is very low. The other side is the potential erosion patterns that it can cause, So you're going to be more working with, trying to get the water off in a way that you're not concentrating flow and increasing velocity. You're still going to need water, though. Yeah. Yeah, to the wetlands. Down low.
The crux of my question is, isn't it possible to plant a food forest and plant permaculture plantings that will provide food without a lot of, maybe at first, of course, you're going to have more watering.
Yeah, we're seeing water as a resource, though. So if we can, that's one of our base resources. And if we could figure out uses and ways that can work for us, then we're increasing the capital on our land. Yes, we can do a lot of things without water. Yeah, certainly. It's hard to have a pond without water, though, or raise fish without water, or have a wetlands without water, or water right around the house if you don't have, So it adds a lot of extra features.
Are you most worried about your plants drowning? Just in general with too much rain?
Well, I haven't planted plants yet.
Okay.
So I just have to be aware of that, 100 inches of rain. I live in a cloud forest.
Yeah.
So I just have to, I want to learn what to plant so that it will survive.
Yeah. So you're going to have to figure out where your best, highest and driest areas are, the places that like to drain. You've got great drainage, so that's perfect. And then you're figuring out your wet places, and you're going to enhance those. I like to take things, if it wants to be wet, I want to go there. Like I want to add, if anything, like work with it and add more water. If it wants to be dry, you can add water to it, but in this case, it's like if you have 100 inches of rain a year, yeah, you're right. You don't need a whole lot of supplemental water. So yeah, there you go.
And I need to slow it down for the erosion.
Yep.
Because I have a spring that looks like a creek right now that is like today has a waterfall in my backyard. It's crazy. And I have a bowl creek that never runs dry and they meet. And I have both
there with meadows on either side of that, so it's pretty awesome, but gotta figure out how to manage it.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions or ideas?
Just a quick question about water and leaching of nutrients. How do you help retain nutrients well?
So your basins and your swales hold nutrients because kind of the cutaway version of it, if we have a hillside, say, and then we dig a swale, and then we pile that earth here, right? And then our hillside goes down, and this is where we're planting, right? Our trees. This, we can establish an overflow height here at whatever height we want this. So this could be a ditch. A ditch has drainage and angle on it. A swale is basically contour is flat, level. So if we set our overflow that the water is this high, then everything that comes in there is going to settle out. So we're trying to slow it down to where it can settle out.
So then it's not just retaining water, but nutrients.
It's a huge nutrient sink.
And then would you just dig out from that ditch periodically and put that on your gardens or whatever?
You can, yeah. Depends on what you have uphill here. Over at the other farm, we have animals. So this is all grass, and then we have animal pressure here. And then when it rains, we have manure and nutrients that end up in here. So it's a huge sink. And then it becomes it's like a perfect spot. It's a tree system, really. Thank you. It's a perfect spot to grow trees because they're high and dry, yet they can access the water. And then they can access this extra nutrients. Does that make sense?
I have a question about that slide. I was hoping you'd ask. Yeah, what is the point number 3? Can you elaborate on that? A well distribution line is following paths.
It's easier when we start to put our distribution lines in to follow either a path or a road, or to go in the middle of a road.
So not put it underneath the cultivated area. Is that what you're saying?
That's true. Yeah, but the road generally is going to take us to where we want to go, and then we can bury it in the road deep enough to where it's not going to get hit and we're not disturbing anything. Yeah, it's just like it's an easy spot to do it. And most subdivisions or homes, try to run the utilities in the road. You guys want to take 5? Yeah?